You ever see one of those power-hungry HOA board members who think they run the world? Well, imagine them trying to arrest a real sheriff, me. That's exactly what happened when these fake HOA police rolled up, flashing their plastic badges. Spoiler alert, it didn't end well for them. Moving into a new neighborhood should be exciting. Fresh start, new surroundings, maybe even some friendly neighbors. That's what I expected when I bought my house, a nice place to relax when I wasn't out enforcing the actual law. What I didn't expect was to be thrown into a petty suburban dictatorship run by a group of middle-aged power trippers who took their homeowners association, HOA, way too seriously. Now, I've dealt with some real criminals in my time: bank robbers, drug dealers, violent offenders. I've faced down people who actually had the ability to do harm, but nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the pure, unfiltered insanity that was HOA Commander Briggs and his so-called enforcement division. It all started the day I moved in. After unloading boxes and getting settled, I parked my sheriff's truck in my driveway and stepped out to take in the view. Nice houses, perfectly cut lawns, a few nosy neighbors peeking from behind their curtains seemed normal, or so I thought. 15 minutes later, a stiff-looking guy in khakis and a polo marched up to me like he was about to issue a warrant. Behind him, two more guys in matching neon vests trailed closely. One of them even had a clipboard. "Can I help you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. The man in front, later introduced to me as Briggs, the self-appointed commander of the HOA's enforcement division, didn't smile. He just adjusted his stance and cleared his throat. "Sir, are you aware that you're in violation of HOA parking codes?" I blinked. "Come again?" "Commercial vehicles are not allowed in residential driveways," he continued, gesturing toward my truck. "You'll need to move it to an off-site storage facility or face a fine." Now, let's pause for a second. This wasn't some work van or food truck. It was a fully marked sheriff's truck, the same one I used to patrol the county and arrest actual criminals. I stared at Briggs, waiting for the punchline. Surely, he'd realize his mistake, laugh, and walk away. But oh no. Briggs wasn't kidding, and this was only the beginning of his reign of stupidity. The next morning, I stepped outside with my coffee, ready to enjoy a quiet morning on my porch. That peaceful moment lasted all of 5 seconds, until I noticed something stuck to my mailbox. A bright orange notice flapped in the breeze, taped right at eye level. I walked over, ripped it off, and read the bold print. "Notice of violation. Immediate action required." My first thought, that was fast. I skimmed the details. According to the HOA Parking Compliance Office, which, mind you, isn't a real thing, I was in direct violation of community vehicle ordinances for keeping a commercial vehicle in my driveway. The penalty, a $250 fine. I actually laughed out loud. These guys were serious. Now, let me clarify something important. I was not part of the HOA. When I bought this house, I made sure it was outside their jurisdiction. The previous owner had opted out years ago, meaning their ridiculous rules had zero authority over me. But clearly, HOA Commander Briggs and his minions didn't get that memo. Still, I figured this was just an overzealous mistake. Maybe they hadn't checked their records. No big deal. I'd clear things up later, or so I thought. An hour later, I heard a knock at my door. I opened it to find Briggs, clipboard guy, and a new face, a stocky man with a mustache, wearing a reflective vest. They stood shoulder to shoulder, like a suburban version of a SWAT team. "Morning, gentlemen," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Briggs wasted no time. He pointed at the notice in my hand. "I see you've received your violation notice. Have you made arrangements to remove the vehicle?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my legally parked, privately owned sheriff's truck?" Briggs pursed his lips. "Sir, we don't make exceptions for law enforcement vehicles. The HOA's guidelines are clear." I held up a hand. "Let me stop you right there. I'm not in your HOA." Silence. The mustached guy shifted uncomfortably. Briggs's expression hardened. "That's irrelevant. These rules apply to all homeowners within the community." "Oh, So that's how they wanted to play it. I smiled. Got it. Guess we'll see about that. The war had begun. By now, I had a pretty good idea of what I was dealing with. A group of HOA zealots who thought they had more power than they actually did. But I still wasn't prepared for the sheer level of stupidity these guys were about to display. That evening, I was out in my driveway, washing my truck, when I noticed 3 figures walking toward me in formation. Here we go again. Briggs was leading the charge, of course, looking like he'd just promoted himself to general. Behind him, Clipboard Guy was flipping through some papers, like he was preparing a legal case, and the third guy, Mustache Man, was now wearing a body cam. Yes, a body cam. I put down my hose and turned to face them. Back so soon? Briggs squared his shoulders. Sir, we are here as part of an official HOA enforcement action. Your continued non-compliance has left us no choice but to escalate. I crossed my arms. Escalate? What exactly do you plan to do? Clipboard Guy cleared his throat. Per Article 4, Section B of the HOA Code of Compliance, failure to adhere to vehicle ordinances may result in community-sanctioned enforcement measures. I blinked. Community-sanctioned enforcement? What does that even mean? Briggs smirked. It means, Sheriff, that you'll be subject to further action if the vehicle is not removed within 24 hours. Now, here's the thing. I'm a lawman. I deal with real criminals. I know what actual legal authority looks like. And let me tell you, these guys, they had none. But I was curious, so I played along. And what kind of action are we talking about here? Briggs glanced at his Clipboard Guy, who hesitated before reading. You may face additional fines, property access restrictions, and, he looked up, community detention. I had to physically stop myself from laughing. Community detention, I repeated. You mean like jail? Briggs nodded, dead serious. Yes, we have the authority to detain non-compliant homeowners until they comply with HOA regulations. That was it. I lost it. I let out a long, slow chuckle before shaking my head. Oh, boys, you just made the biggest mistake of your lives. They had no idea who they were messing with. By now, it was clear. Briggs and his wannabe lawmen were completely detached from reality. These guys actually believed they had the power to detain me for not following their HOA's made-up rules. And honestly, I was curious to see just how far they were willing to take this stupidity. So, I decided to play along. I leaned against my truck, arms crossed, and said, "All right, Commander, let's say I don't move my truck. What happens next?" Briggs smirked, like he had just outmaneuvered me in some kind of suburban chess match. Then, you will be subject to HOA-sanctioned towing procedures, and additional citations will be issued against your property. Clipboard Guy eagerly nodded. You may also be referred to our legal compliance department for further disciplinary action. I took a slow sip of my coffee, just to let the tension build. And who exactly is towing my truck? Mustache Man, who, by the way, was recording everything with his little body cam like he was filming an episode of HOA Cops, cleared his throat. We have a towing contractor on standby. I smiled. Is that so? Briggs nodded. Yes. They have been authorized to impound any vehicle in violation of HOA codes. Now, here's where things get really fun, because these guys had absolutely no idea what they were walking into. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my actual sheriff's badge. Held it up, real casual-like. Funny thing about that, Briggs's smirk faltered. Clipboard Guy stopped writing. Mustache Man, he actually took a step back. I let the silence stretch before I said, "You see, towing a law enforcement vehicle without legal cause, that's called vehicle theft. And impersonating an officer to do it, that's a felony." Briggs swallowed hard. I turned to Mustache Man. You still rolling on that body cam, buddy? Hope so, because you just recorded yourself admitting to attempted unlawful detainment. Silence. Clipboard Guy started furiously flipping through his papers, like he was searching for a way out. And that's when I knew. These guys had just realized they'd picked the wrong driveway to mess with after their humiliating defeat in my driveway. I figured Briggs and his wannabe rent-a-cops would back off. I was wrong. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab the newspaper when I noticed something tucked under my windshield wiper, a piece of paper, fluttering in the breeze. I already knew it was going to be some HOA nonsense, but nothing could have prepared me for the sheer level of stupidity I was about to witness. I pulled the paper free and read the bold print at the top. HOA Enforcement Division, official citation. Oh, here we go. I skimmed through the ridiculous list of violations they had apparently slapped on me. Unauthorized parking, $250 fine. Failure to comply with HOA regulations, $150 fine. Obstruction of community safety standards, $100 fine. And my personal favorite, failure to recognize HOA authority, $500 fine. That one actually made me laugh. They were fining me for not bowing down to their dictatorship. Then I saw something even better. At the bottom of the ticket, they had printed, failure to pay within 7 days may result in legal action, vehicle impoundment, or community detention. Oh, these guys were really leaning into their fake cop fantasy. Now, here's the part where most people might panic. Most homeowners, they see an official-looking ticket, a bunch of legal-sounding threats, and they cough up the money just to make the HOA go away. But I'm not most homeowners, and here's what Briggs and his little enforcement squad didn't know. The fake citation they had just placed on my truck, it had a forged legal seal, a bogus reference to a non-existent local ordinance, and, my personal favorite, a signature that didn't belong to any actual legal authority. This wasn't just an annoying HOA fine. This was fraud, and they had just given me physical evidence of their illegal scam. I smiled, folded the citation neatly, and slid it into my pocket. Briggs and his crew had just handed me the rope they were about to hang themselves with. They just didn't know it yet. At this point, I knew Briggs and his HOA goon squad were relentless, but I figured they'd eventually realize they were messing with the wrong guy and back off. Nope. Because later that evening, I heard the sound of metal clanking against my truck's tires. I stepped onto my porch, just in time to see 2 of Briggs's officers crouched down next to my front wheel. And what were they doing? Trying to put a boot on my sheriff's truck. I just stood there for a second, taking it all in. 2 civilians, dressed like Walmart security guards, were attempting to impound a law enforcement vehicle. I cleared my throat. Both of them froze. Clipboard guy was holding what looked like a laminated instruction sheet on how to apply the boot. Mustache man had the actual device in his hands, fumbling with the lock. Neither of them spoke, so I decided to break the silence. Evening, gentlemen. Need some help? Clipboard guy immediately dropped his laminated sheet and took a step back. Mustache man, bless his heart, actually tried to act tough. Sir, this vehicle is in violation of HOA. I held up a hand. Let me stop you right there, bud. Do you know what happens when you tamper with a government vehicle? Mustache man blinked. Clipboard guy turned pale. I continued. It's called criminal mischief, and depending on the damage, it could be a felony. Not to mention, I pointed at my sheriff's emblem on the side of the truck. This vehicle belongs to law enforcement, which means you're also flirting with obstruction of justice. Clipboard guy took another step back. Mustache man visibly started sweating. At that moment, the cavalry arrived. Briggs himself came storming down the street, looking like he was about to issue a military command. Karen, HOA president, was right behind him, arms crossed, looking smug. Briggs puffed out his chest. Sir, I need you to step away from the vehicle. I stared at him, then I grinned. Or what? Briggs smirked. Or we'll be forced to place you under community arrest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These guys were actually trying to arrest a sheriff. This was about to get good. If there's one thing I've learned from years in law enforcement, it's that some people will talk themselves straight into handcuffs. And Briggs, he was one of those people. There he stood, arms crossed like some TV detective, flanked by Mustache Man and Clipboard Guy, with Karen, the HOA president, hovering behind him like an evil sorceress, ready to cast a suburban curse. Sir, step away from the vehicle, Briggs repeated, voice full of self-importance. I raised an eyebrow. And if I don't? Briggs squared his shoulders. Then, as per HOA regulations, you will be placed under community arrest. I let that one sit for a second. Community arrest. This man just threatened to arrest a sheriff. I should have been furious. I should have been calling backup to haul these idiots straight to jail. But honestly, I was having too much fun. I folded my arms and leaned against my truck. All right, Commander, educate me. What, exactly, is a community arrest? Briggs straightened like he was about to give a constitutional lecture. Clipboard guy flipped through his papers, trying to find some fake legal reference. A community arrest, Briggs began, is an action authorized under HOA Section 5, Article 3, allowing enforcement officers, such as myself, to detain a resident who refuses to comply with regulations. I nodded, acting impressed. I see. And what exactly does this detention involve? Briggs didn't hesitate. You will be restrained and escorted to a designated holding area until a compliance hearing is scheduled. I smirked. A holding area? Karen chimed in. We have a secured room in the clubhouse. I had to physically stop myself from laughing. These people had set up their own little HOA jail. I glanced at Mustache Man, who was trying way too hard to look intimidating. And you guys plan to restrain me? Physically? Briggs nodded. If necessary. I let out a long sigh and shook my head. Wow, this is incredible. Briggs smiled, thinking he'd won. Then I pulled out my real badge. You know what else is incredible? The fact that impersonating a law enforcement officer is a third-degree felony. Karen's mouth fell open. Clipboard guy's papers fluttered to the ground. And Briggs? He finally realized he was in big trouble. Briggs was frozen in place, his fake authority crumbling faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. Clipboard guy was already sweating bullets, and Mustache Man suddenly looked like he regretted every life choice that led him to this moment. But Karen? Oh, Karen was not going down without a fight. She stepped forward, chin raised like a medieval queen, defending her crumbling castle. Now listen here, she snapped. This community follows strict guidelines, and you are breaking the rules. I sighed and tucked my actual sheriff's badge back into my pocket. Karen, let's go over this one more time. She folded her arms. I don't need a lecture. I smirked. Oh, but you do. See, I'm not in your HOA. My house is on private property. Your little HOA police have no jurisdiction here. And impersonating an officer? I gestured toward Briggs and his goons. That's a crime. Karen wasn't having it. I don't care who you are, she snapped. This community has standards, and we will enforce them. And then, in an act of pure entitlement, she pulled out her phone and called 911. I almost laughed. She turned away from me, pacing dramatically as she ranted to the dispatcher. Yes, I need to report a hostile individual. He's refusing to comply with lawful orders. He's threatening our HOA officers. I leaned against my truck and waited, already knowing exactly how this was going to play out. Karen kept rambling, her voice getting louder and more dramatic. Yes, he claims to be law enforcement, but he's being aggressive. I demand officers be sent immediately. I could only imagine the poor 911 dispatcher on the other end, rolling their eyes. After a moment, Karen turned back to me, smug as ever. The police are on their way. I smiled. Oh, I can't wait. Briggs shifted uncomfortably. Clipboard guy was inching toward the sidewalk, probably contemplating a quiet escape. Karen folded her arms. When they get here, you're going to jail for harassment and non-compliance. I checked my watch. Oh, I don't think that's how this is going to go. Because here's the thing. I already knew the responding officers. And when they got here, Karen was in for one hell of a surprise. Karen stood there, phone still clutched in her manicured hand, smirking like she had just delivered the final blow. Oh, you're in big trouble now, she sneered. You have no idea who you're dealing with, I chuckled. Oh, trust me, Karen, I do. And that's what makes this so much fun. Briggs, still rattled from my badge reveal, decided to make one last desperate power move. He squared his shoulders and pointed at me. Enough, he barked. Sir, as commander of the HOA Enforcement Division, I am placing you under community arrest for obstruction of neighborhood policy and refusal to comply with an official citation. Now, let's pause for a second. Did Briggs, a man wearing a reflective vest from Home Depot, just attempt to arrest a sitting sheriff? Yes, he did. I blinked at him, making sure I had actually heard what I thought I did. Come again? I asked, just to be sure. Briggs straightened, looking proud of himself. You are to remain in custody at the HOA clubhouse until your compliance hearing is scheduled. I rubbed my chin thoughtfully. And how exactly do you plan to take me into custody? That's when Mustache Man and Clipboard Guy took a step forward. Oh, this just kept getting better and better. Clipboard Guy looked nervous, but Mustache Man was committed. He reached for his plastic zip ties, the same kind you buy in bulk at a hardware store. I held up a hand. Before you go breaking out the kitty restraints, let me ask you a question. Do you know what false imprisonment is? Mustache Man hesitated. Briggs, however, doubled down. This is lawful enforcement, he declared. I pulled out my phone. Cool, hold that thought. And right there, in front of them, I called dispatch. Yeah, this is Sheriff. Last name. Got 3 suspects attempting an unlawful detainment at my residence, requesting immediate assistance. Karen's smug expression cracked. Clipboard Guy turned ghost white. Mustache Man put his zip ties back in his pocket. And Briggs, for the first time, he looked genuinely scared, because the real law was about to show up, and it wasn't going to end well for him. The second I hung up the phone, the atmosphere shifted. Briggs, Mustache Man, and Clipboard Guy. All 3 of them had been so sure of themselves just seconds ago. Now, panic was creeping in. Karen, however, was still in full Karen mode. She jabbed a finger at me. You are not calling the police on us. We called first. That means you're the one in trouble. I just smiled. That's not how the law works, Karen. But Karen was fully committed to her fantasy. She turned to Briggs, hands on her hips. Do something. Briggs, probably realizing his entire life was about to fall apart, went for broke. Sir, you are obstructing an official HOA enforcement action. If you do not comply immediately, we will use force. I blinked. You'll what now? Briggs clenched his fists like he actually thought he could take me in a fight. We will physically escort you to the clubhouse if necessary. Mustache Man nodded, which was hilarious, because the guy was sweating so hard it looked like he'd just run a marathon. Clipboard Guy, however, took another step back. He wasn't about this life. I exhaled, shaking my head. Briggs, let me explain something to you. I took a step forward. Instinctively, he took one back. First of all, HOA rules are not laws. You have 0 legal authority over me. Briggs swallowed hard. Second, this little stunt you're pulling, it's called unlawful detainment. You don't have the right to lay a finger on me, and if you try, I smiled, that's assault. Clipboard Guy visibly gulped. Mustache Man looked at Briggs like he suddenly regretted signing up for his little fake police force. Briggs, though, he doubled down. We are within our rights, he insisted. Karen nodded furiously. This is our neighborhood. We have every right to enforce the rules. And right at that moment, just as their delusions hit an all-time high, we all heard the distant wail of sirens. I checked my watch. Oh, would you look at that? The real police are here. Briggs froze. Clipboard Guy started shaking his head. Mustache Man, he straight up turned and started walking away. And Karen? For the first time, she looked absolutely terrified. The sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the awkward silence like a knife. Briggs, who just moments ago was threatening to physically detain me, suddenly looked like he was reconsidering all of his life choices. Clipboard Guy's hands were shaking. Mustache Man was trying to casually slip away like he wasn't part of this mess. And Karen? Oh, Karen was still trying to hold her ground. She straightened her shoulders and said, "Good, the police will sort this out." I smirked. Oh, I guarantee they will. We all turned as 2 patrol cars pulled up. The first officer to step out, Deputy Ross. Now I knew Ross personally. We worked together. Good guy, level-headed. But when he saw Briggs, Clipboard Guy, and Mustache Man in their ridiculous fake uniforms, he actually laughed. "Sheriff," he greeted me with a smirk. "You want to tell me what the hell is going on here?" Before I could answer, Karen shoved herself forward. "Officer, arrest this man. He's harassing HOA officials, refusing to comply with legal orders, and obstructing an enforcement action." Ross raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "You harassing HOA officials again, Sheriff?" I chuckled. "Nah, just minding my own business in my own driveway." Ross nodded, glancing over at Briggs, who was sweating bullets. "And these guys?" I crossed my arms. "Oh, these guys? Well, let's see. They tried to detain me illegally. issued fake citations with a forged legal seal, attempted to boot a government vehicle, and impersonated law enforcement. Ross's smirk instantly vanished. "That true?" he asked, turning to Briggs. Briggs looked like he wanted to throw up. Clipboard Guy was now visibly shaking. Mustache Man was practically vibrating with regret. Karen, though, she doubled down. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked. "We have every right to enforce our community rules. This man is a threat to our order." Ross sighed and turned back to me. "You pressing charges?" I smiled. "Oh, absolutely." Briggs visibly deflated. Clipboard Guy let out a tiny whimper, and Karen, for the first time, she finally realized she wasn't in control anymore. You ever watch someone go from overly confident to full-blown panic in real time? Because that's exactly what was happening to Briggs, Clipboard Guy, and Mustache Man. Ross, my deputy, had just asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't even have to think about it. Oh, absolutely. The second those words left my mouth, the energy shifted. Clipboard Guy's face went ghost white. Mustache Man looked like he wanted to run but knew it was too late. And Briggs, his entire demeanor collapsed. The fake authority, the smugness, the belief that he was in control, gone. "Now hold on," he started, his voice shaking. "Let's be reasonable here." I smiled. "Reasonable? Oh, you mean like how you tried to illegally detain me? Or maybe how you forged a legal document? Or wait, was it the part where you attempted to steal my truck?" Ross didn't even have to ask again. "Turn around," he said, reaching for his cuffs. Briggs actually took a step back, eyes darting to Karen for help. But Karen? Oh, she was in full meltdown mode. "This is outrageous," she screamed. "He's a menace to our community. You should be arresting him, not us." Ross turned to her, clearly unimpressed. "Ma'am, did you, or did you not, instruct these men to enforce unlawful detainment?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She had no good answer. "Did you, or did you not approve false citations with a forged legal seal?" Ross added. Karen crossed her arms like a child about to throw a tantrum. "It was necessary." Ross sighed. "Yeah, that's what I thought." He nodded at his partner. "Cuff her too." Karen actually screamed. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." "Yeah, well now you're under arrest," Ross said, bored. The best part? Clipboard Guy, who had been quiet this entire time, turned around and put his hands behind his back before anyone even asked. Ross blinked. Okay then." Briggs and Karen, not so cooperative, and that was perfectly fine, because watching them get dragged away in cuffs was going to be the best part of my week. Briggs, Karen, and the rest of their little HOA pretend police force were finally realizing they weren't in control anymore, and watching their faces crumble as reality set in, priceless. Karen was still shrieking about her authority as Ross's partner tightened the cuffs around her wrists. "I am the HOA president. You can't do this." Ross sighed, completely unfazed. Yeah, you can tell that to the judge." Briggs, meanwhile, was going through all 5 stages of grief at once. "Look, this is all just a misunderstanding," he stammered, sweat practically dripping from his forehead. "We were just enforcing community guidelines." Ross turned to me. "Sheriff, let's run through this real quick. They tried to unlawfully detain you." I nodded. "Yep." "They forged legal documents." "Mm-hmm." "Issued fake citations." "Yep." "Tried to boot a law enforcement vehicle." I smirked. "Oh yeah, that one was my personal favorite." Ross shook his head and looked at Briggs. "So, here's what's gonna happen. You, Karen, and your little task force here are all being arrested for impersonating law enforcement, attempted unlawful detainment, and fraud." Briggs panicked. Okay, wait." He was desperate now. "I didn't know it was illegal." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, so your plan was to arrest me without knowing the law? Great leadership, Commander." "Commander?" Ross wasn't having it. He motioned to the patrol car. "Let's go." Clipboard Guy, who had already surrendered himself like a man who knew his fate, shuffled forward without argument. Mustache Man, on the other hand, looked like he was about to cry. "This wasn't my idea," he blurted. "Briggs told us we had authority." Ross smirked. "You know what they say. Ignorance isn't a defense." And just like that, the fake cops were loaded into the real cop car. Karen, still in full denial, screamed at the officers. Do you know who I am? I crossed my arms. Yeah, you're the lady going viral for getting arrested in her own neighborhood. Karen's face drained of color because she knew this was only going to get worse. Briggs was sweating bullets. Karen had already been shoved into the back of a patrol car, still screaming about how this was all a mistake. Clipboard Guy had accepted his fate with quiet defeat. Mustache Man looked one wrong move away from bursting into tears. But Briggs, he still thought he had a way out. Look, he started, his voice shaking. Maybe we went a little too far, okay? But this isn't a criminal matter. This is a simple misunderstanding. Ross just stared at him. A misunderstanding? Yes. Briggs nodded frantically, clearly grasping at straws. We all thought we had legal authority to enforce HOA rules. We weren't impersonating officers. We were just, regulating compliance, I snorted. Regulating compliance? That what you call it when you try to zip-tie a sheriff and throw him in your clubhouse jail? Briggs had no comeback. Ross took a step forward, expression stone cold. Let me explain something to you, Commander, Ross said, mocking the ridiculous title. Impersonating law enforcement, that's a felony. Illegally booting a vehicle, felony. Attempting to detain someone, felony. Briggs swallowed hard. Ross continued, laying it all out. You didn't just overstep your authority, you committed actual crimes. And you know what's funny? You thought you could get away with it. Briggs opened his mouth, then closed it. His brain was short-circuiting. Turn around, Ross ordered. For the first time all day, Briggs actually looked scared. Wait, I can explain. I bet you can, Ross cut him off. Save it for your lawyer. Hands behind your back. And then, this was the best part. Ross cuffed him. Briggs sucked in a breath, his face going red, as he realized there was no escaping this. For all his fake authority, all his phony citations, and all his HOA-backed nonsense, he was now the one being arrested. I leaned in, grinning ear to ear. Hey, Commander, how's it feel to get arrested by an actual cop? Briggs glared at me, but he didn't answer, because he knew he'd lost. Briggs was officially in cuffs. Clipboard Guy, already in the back of a squad car. Mustache Man, sobbing quietly, probably wondering how HOA rule enforcement turned into a felony arrest. And Karen, still screaming. This is illegal, she shrieked from inside the police car. I demand to speak to someone in charge. Ross didn't even glance her way. Ma'am, that would be the sheriff. He gestured to me. Karen's eyes snapped to mine. The moment true realization hit her face. Beautiful. No, this isn't happening. We were just doing our jobs. I leaned against my truck, arms crossed, enjoying every second. Oh, you mean impersonating officers, issuing fake citations and trying to detain people in your clubhouse prison? Karen turned bright red. That's not what happened, she shrieked. We were upholding community standards. I grinned. Yeah, well, the state law says you were committing multiple felonies, so I guess we'll have to let the judge decide. Ross turned back to me. Sheriff, just to confirm, are you pressing charges? I didn't even hesitate. Oh, absolutely. Briggs let out a pathetic whimper. Clipboard Guy, physically deflated. Mustache Man actually looked like he might faint. Karen, she finally shut up. Ross nodded. All right then. He turned to the other officers. Get them processed. We'll handle the paperwork at the station. Briggs twisted in his cuffs. Wait. Can't we talk about this? Ross sighed. You had plenty of time to talk before you committed multiple crimes. You really thought you were going to arrest a sheriff and just walk away. Briggs had no answer. Karen, for the first time since this entire nightmare started, looked genuinely afraid. I watched as the once powerful HOA overlords, the same people who thought they could bully the neighborhood into submission, were hauled off like common criminals. And the best part? This was only the beginning of their downfall. As soon as Briggs and his wannabe enforcers were stuffed into the back of the squad cars, reality finally hit them. Karen, who had been shrieking non-stop just moments ago, was suddenly silent. Her face had gone from raging Karen red to full-on ghost white. Briggs, he looked like he was about to pass out. Clipboard Guy had entered what I could only describe as a state of pure existential crisis. And Mustache Man, he had officially hit the bargaining phase. Look, I was just following orders, he blurted out. I didn't know this was illegal. Ross shot him a look. That's cute, but I was just following orders doesn't really hold up in court. Karen suddenly snapped out of her shock-induced silence. We can fix this, she shrieked. This doesn't need to go to court. Sheriff, be reasonable. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, you mean like how reasonable you were when you tried to have me illegally detained? Karen's mouth opened, then closed. No response. Briggs, still desperately clinging to hope, tried to play the sympathy card. Look, he started, voice trembling. We're all neighbors here. Maybe we just misunderstood the rules. I chuckled. Misunderstood? Oh no, you understood perfectly. You just thought no one would stand up to you. Briggs clenched his jaw, looking like a man who knew his fate was sealed. Meanwhile, across the street, neighbors had started coming out to watch. A few were filming. Others were whispering to each other, eyes wide. Some were even grinning. Because let's be honest, these people had been terrorized by the HOA for years, and now they were finally watching their self-proclaimed overlords get hauled away in handcuffs. Please, Karen screeched, making one last attempt to regain control. This is a community. You're destroying it. I smiled. No, Karen, you did that, all by yourself. Ross nodded to his partner. All right, let's wrap this up. And just like that, Briggs, Karen, and their fake little police force were driven off to face real justice. And me, I was just getting started. You ever see someone realize they completely ruined their life in real time? Because that's exactly what was happening inside that squad car. Karen, Briggs, clipboard guy, and mustache man had officially gone from the neighborhood's most feared authorities to a bunch of handcuffed criminals. And the best part? Their downfall was just getting started. As the patrol cars pulled away, I turned to Ross. So, how long until they're booked? Ross smirked. I'd say within the hour. Should be interesting to see what happens when they realize their HOA authority doesn't mean squat in actual jail. I chuckled. Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world, and I meant it. Because I had every intention of watching them go through the full booking process. Now, if you've never been arrested, which I assume you haven't, getting booked is a special kind of humiliation. First, they're taken to the station. Then comes the pat-down, the fingerprinting, the confiscation of personal items, and of course the mugshot. Oh, that glorious mugshot. I arrived at the station just in time to watch the process unfold. Briggs was up first, his usual fake tough commander act completely gone. He looked like a wet sponge of regret as he stood against the gray backdrop. Face forward, the officer instructed. Briggs mumbled something under his breath before the camera snapped. Click. One HOA dictator down. Clipboard guy followed next, his face frozen in pure despair. Then came mustache man, who looked like he was actively fighting back tears. And finally, Karen. Her face was pure rage. I could almost hear her internal monologue. How dare they? I'm important. I'm the HOA president. She stood against the backdrop, fists clenched. Ma'am, look at the camera, the officer said. Karen's eye twitched. She turned, her face burning with anger. Click. And just like that, their HOA reign of terror officially ended. Their crimes were on record, their mugshots, public, and the neighborhood, finally free. If I had to rank top-tier public meltdowns, what happened next would easily make the top 3. Right after Karen's glorious mugshot was taken, reality hit her like a freight train. She turned on the officers processing her, flipping from outraged suburban queen to full-blown banshee. This is unacceptable, she shrieked, her voice so shrill it could probably break glass. Ross, completely unfazed, sighed. Ma'am, you need to calm down. Oh, but Karen didn't do calm. She stomped her foot, like that was going to magically undo the fact that she was in handcuffs, standing in a booking room. Do you know who I am? She screamed. Ross exchanged a look with one of the other officers. Then, without missing a beat, he said, Yeah, you're the lady who just got arrested. Karen lost it. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I have rights. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, enjoying every second. Oh, you do have rights, I said with a smirk. The right to remain silent for one. You should probably use it. Karen wheeled around to face me, eyes blazing. This is all your fault. I gave her a friendly nod. Yep, and I'd do it again. Briggs, who had been quietly spiraling in the corner, finally spoke. "Look, let's be reasonable here," he said, his voice shaky. "Maybe we can settle this another way?" Ross raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You trying to bribe law enforcement now?" Briggs's face drained of color. "No, I just mean, maybe we can make a deal." Ross smirked. "Oh, there's definitely going to be a deal, but it's going to be in court." Karen let out a frustrated scream. "I built that neighborhood. I made it what it is." I grinned. "And now, you're the reason it's on the news. Because, oh yeah, this disaster was already making waves. The local news had picked up the story. The headline, HOA president arrested, fake enforcement gone wrong." Karen's meltdown was about to be broadcast to the entire city. And the best part? She had absolutely no control over it. If Karen thought her public meltdown was the worst thing to happen to her that day, she was dead wrong. Because the second her mugshot hit the internet, this whole situation exploded. The local news stations jumped on the story immediately, and by the time I got home, the headlines were already going viral. HOA president arrested for impersonating law enforcement. Neighborhood power trip ends in jail time, and my personal favorite, Karen and the fake HOA police, a suburban disaster. Oh, but it didn't stop there. See, I may have dealt with criminals before, but you know who's truly ruthless? The internet. By the next morning, Karen, Briggs, clipboard guy, and mustache man were everywhere. Their mugshots, meme material. Briggs's defeated expression turned into a reaction image. Clipboard guy's empty, soulless stare. Instant gif. Karen. Oh, Karen's meltdown was a work of art. Someone found the video of her screaming at the cops and posted it with the caption, "When you realize HOA rules don't apply in jail." It got over 100,000 views in less than a day, and the neighborhood, they were loving it. I woke up to a flood of texts from neighbors thanking me. Some sent screenshots of the news coverage. Others sent memes. One neighbor, a guy who had been fined for having a garden gnome too close to the sidewalk, sent me a picture of his new lawn ornament. It was a statue of Karen's mugshot. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Meanwhile, Karen, she was scrambling. Word on the street was that she had called every lawyer in town, trying to find someone to fix this. But here's the thing, you can't fix a felony arrest. The HOA's golden dictatorship was over, and Karen, she was officially the most hated woman in the neighborhood. The internet was having a field day with Karen and her wannabe law enforcement squad. But while she was busy trying to salvage her reputation, something even worse was happening behind the scenes. The HOA was crumbling. Now, normally, HOAs are pretty untouchable. They operate like miniature dictatorships, bullying homeowners with endless fines, ridiculous rules, and enough red tape to choke a lawyer. But this was a disaster of their own making. See, while Karen was screaming about how this was all a huge misunderstanding, the actual homeowners were starting to ask questions. Big ones like, wait, they were running a fake police force? How many of our fines were actually legal? Did they just make up rules whenever they wanted? And the best part? The answer to all of those questions was yes. Turns out, Karen and her little council of power-hungry goons had been running the HOA like their own personal mafia. They had been illegally issuing fines, threatening homeowners with bogus citations, and using their authority to intimidate anyone who questioned them. And now the entire HOA board was under investigation. Homeowners started filing complaints left and right. Lawyers got involved. Some people even demanded refunds for the fines they had paid over the years. And the board members, they turned on each other fast. One guy, the HOA treasurer, straight up quit and publicly trashed Karen on social media, saying he had no idea they were faking citations and wanted nothing to do with her. Another board member tried to defend Karen until the receipts started rolling in. Emails, letters, texts, proof that she had personally approved bogus fines and even encouraged the fake police nonsense. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion, and within a matter of days, the once powerful HOA board completely fell apart. By the time the dust settled, Karen was facing criminal charges, Briggs was lawyering up, and the neighborhood was free from their tyranny. And me, I was loving every second of it. If Karen thought getting arrested was the worst thing to happen to her, she was about to get hit with another reality check. Because while she and Briggs were busy lawyering up and trying to save themselves, the homeowners had other plans. See, it wasn't enough that the HOA collapsed. The people who lived in the neighborhood wanted revenge, financial revenge. Turns out, when you illegally fine homeowners, forge documents, and run a fake police force, you open yourself up to a whole lot of lawsuits. And that's exactly what happened. Within a week, a group of homeowners filed a class action lawsuit against the HOA board. Their argument? The HOA had been illegally collecting fines for years. They had issued fraudulent citations with no legal basis. Homeowners had been forced to pay thousands of dollars in bogus penalties. And now, they wanted every single penny back. Karen, naturally, tried to play the victim. "This is a witch hunt," she whined in an online post. "Everything we did was for the good of the community." The internet tore her apart. One user responded, "Oh yeah, nothing says good for the community like impersonating cops and throwing people in fake jail." Another simply posted her mugshot with the caption, "Good luck in court, Sheriff Karen." Meanwhile, Karen's legal team was crumbling. See, defending one lawsuit, that's one thing. Defending dozens of furious homeowners, all demanding their money back, plus damages, that's something no lawyer wants to deal with. Briggs, clipboard guy, and mustache man weren't safe either. Since they were directly involved in issuing fake citations, they were also named in the lawsuit. And the best part, the HOA's insurance refused to cover them, meaning Karen, Briggs, and the others would have to pay out of pocket. Oh, and let's not forget, they were still facing criminal charges. So now, they were broke, humiliated, and completely out of options. And for the first time ever, Karen had nothing to say. If Karen thought her life couldn't get any worse, she was about to learn the hard way that karma wasn't done with her yet. Because while she was battling lawsuits, dealing with criminal charges, and watching her HOA empire crumble, the neighborhood had one last gift for her, an eviction notice. Now, to be clear, Karen owned her house. No one could legally evict her in the traditional sense. But what happens when an entire neighborhood hates you? What happens when you go from being the self-appointed queen of the HOA to the most despised person on the block? You get voted out. See, even though the HOA was practically dead, there was one last meeting scheduled, and at that meeting, the homeowners had a single item on the agenda, a vote of no confidence against Karen. In other words, they wanted her gone. No more Karen at community events. No more Karen trying to control what color people painted their mailboxes. No more Karen, period. By the time the meeting started, nearly every homeowner showed up. People who had never cared about HOA meetings before suddenly had a strong opinion, and when the vote was cast, unanimous. Karen was officially banned from holding any HOA-related position ever again. But the best part? Multiple homeowners sent formal complaints to the real estate board, asking if Karen's property could be declared a public nuisance. Translation, they wanted her out of the neighborhood completely, and the pressure worked. Karen, drowning in legal fees, despised by every neighbor, and officially powerless, put her house on the market. By the time the listing went up, the comments started rolling in. "Oh look, the dictator's palace is for sale. Does the house come with a fake police badge? Buy the house, remove the HOA stench, and enjoy freedom." Karen had spent years controlling the neighborhood, and now she was running away from it. And I was enjoying every second of her downfall. After all the chaos, arrests, lawsuits, and Karen's dramatic exit, one thing was finally clear. I had won. The HOA was in ruins. Karen and her fake police squad were either in jail, in court, or completely disgraced. And the best part? My truck was still parked right in my driveway. No more fake citations. No more threats of community arrest. No more idiots trying to boot a law enforcement vehicle. I could finally live in peace. But that didn't stop me from having a little fun with my victory. See, after Karen packed up and left, the neighborhood changed overnight. People were putting up decorations without fear of fines. Backyard grills and lawn chairs started appearing again. Someone even had the audacity to paint their mailbox blue, a crime punishable by death under Karen's rule. And me, I decided to make a little statement of my own. A few weeks after the dust settled, I bought a brand new custom sign for my property. It wasn't huge, just a nice, professionally made plaque that I mounted near my driveway. It read, "Private property, not under HOA jurisdiction." And beneath that, in smaller print, "If you're here to issue a fake citation, attempt a fake arrest, or enforce fake laws, please take a moment to reflect on your life choices." The neighbors loved it. People stopped by just to take pictures. A few even asked where they could buy one for their own driveways. The funniest part? I heard from a few folks that Briggs, clipboard guy, and mustache man all saw it. And Karen? Oh, Karen definitely saw it. Apparently, she drove by one last time before leaving town and caught sight of my sign. She was so furious, she sped off without saying a word. And with that, the final chapter of her rule came to a perfect, petty close. My house, still mine. My truck, still parked exactly where I wanted it. The HOA, dead and buried. And Karen, nothing but a bad memory. After months of legal battles, hearings, and desperate attempts at avoiding punishment, the day finally arrived. Sentencing day. Karen, Briggs, clipboard guy, and mustache man were all officially standing before a judge, facing the consequences of their ridiculous power trip. Now, to be fair, they weren't exactly hardened criminals. They weren't getting locked away for life, but that didn't mean they were getting off easy. Karen, naturally, tried to play the victim one last time. "Your Honor, I was only acting in the best interest of the community. This has all been blown out of proportion." The judge, an older woman with zero patience for nonsense, peered at Karen over her glasses. "Ms. Peterson, you were caught on video attempting to detain a homeowner under fake legal authority. You signed off on fraudulent citations and illegally collected thousands in fines. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a crime." Karen visibly deflated. Briggs didn't even try to argue. The second he was called up, he looked at his lawyer, sighed, and accepted his fate. Clipboard guy and mustache man didn't say a word. They all stood there, waiting to hear what would happen next. And when the sentences were handed down, oh, it was beautiful. Briggs, 6 months of probation, community service, and a permanent criminal record for impersonating law enforcement. Clipboard guy and mustache man fined thousands of dollars and banned from holding any position of power in an HOA for life. Karen, oh, Karen got it the worst. Not only was she facing a hefty fine, but she was also personally held liable for the fraudulent fines she issued, meaning she had to pay back every single homeowner she scammed. And since the class action lawsuit was still active, she was about to lose a whole lot more. The moment the judge hammered down the final ruling, Karen's expression said it all. She had lost everything. Her power, her reputation, her money, gone. And as I watched her and her fake officers shuffle out of the courtroom, defeated and humiliated, I knew one thing for certain. Justice had been served. Karen and her wannabe law enforcement squad were officially disgraced. They had been arrested, fined, sued, and publicly humiliated. But the damage didn't stop there, because while they were busy fighting legal battles and losing everything, the entire neighborhood was making sure their reign of terror would never be forgotten. See, before all of this, the HOA had a solid reputation. It was known as a strict but well-maintained community. Houses sold fast, prices were high. But now, the HOA was known for one thing, and one thing only: corruption. Home values plummeted. People who had once bragged about living in a prestigious community were suddenly embarrassed. And the worst part, nobody wanted to buy a house there. Why? Because the internet never forgets. The HOA's name was now linked to Karen's crimes. A quick Google search would pull up news articles, mugshots, and viral videos of the whole disaster. One real estate agent even admitted that potential buyers were walking away the second they found out where the house was located. "People don't want to live in a place known for harassing homeowners," she explained. Ouch. Meanwhile, former HOA board members were scrambling to fix the damage. They tried to rebrand the HOA, changing the name and promising a new era of leadership. It didn't work, because the people still living there, oh, they were furious. They started attending every HOA meeting, demanding answers. They wanted refunds for past fines. They wanted assurances that nothing like this would ever happen again, and most importantly, they wanted the HOA to have as little power as possible. By the end of the year, the once powerful HOA was nothing more than a formality. No more ridiculous fines, no more harassment, no more petty dictators running the neighborhood. It was just a normal place to live again. And Karen, she was nothing but a bad memory, a cautionary tale of what happens when you take suburban power too far. With Karen and her wannabe police force gone, the HOA dismantled, humiliated, and powerless, life in the neighborhood finally felt normal. No more harassment, no more fake citations, no more community detention threats, and most importantly, my sheriff's truck was still parked right in my driveway. No one could touch it. No one could tell me where to park. No one could boot it in the middle of the night. And every time I walked outside and saw it sitting there, I felt nothing but satisfaction, because I hadn't just won a petty battle. I had completely destroyed the HOA's reign of terror. Now, whenever I ran into former victims of Karen's ridiculous rules, they had nothing but gratitude. One guy, who had been fined $200 for having a garden gnome, walked up to me with a huge grin. "Guess what?" he said. "I bought 10 more gnomes, put them all over my lawn." I laughed. "They going to war?" "Oh yeah," he smirked. "Gnome army, baby." Another neighbor, who had been forced to repaint their mailbox 3 times because of Karen's ever-changing approved color list, finally got their revenge. They painted their mailbox neon green, with Karen's mugshot printed on the side. I nearly spit out my coffee when I saw it. But the best part? Karen had to drive past it every time she came back to pack up her stuff. And speaking of Karen, her house was still on the market. Turns out, nobody wanted to buy a house linked to one of the most hated HOA presidents in history. And as much as she tried to distance herself from the scandal, the internet wasn't letting it go. Every listing flooded with comments. "Does this house come with a fake police force? Do I get fined if I breathe too loudly? Asking for a friend. Can I park my truck here?" Karen built her legacy on controlling people, and now she had lost everything. Meanwhile, I had won, and it was glorious. Standing on my porch, coffee in hand, I looked out at the neighborhood that had once been ruled by fear. Now, it was finally free. No more HOA overlords. No more ridiculous fines for mailbox colors. No more fake cops pretending they had power. And Karen, she was gone. Her house sat vacant, her reputation destroyed, and her legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about what happens when you push people too far. It wasn't just about me winning. It was about the entire neighborhood winning, because for years, people had lived in fear of stepping out of line. Now, they were celebrating. One guy threw a block party, something Karen had banned. Another neighbor put up a Halloween display in April, just because he could. And the best one? A homeowner hung a massive banner on their garage that read, "Karen Free Zone." The new HOA board, what was left of it, had no power. They couldn't fine anyone. They couldn't enforce ridiculous rules. They had been neutered. And me, I was just enjoying the victory. One afternoon, as I was washing my truck in my driveway, something that would have been illegal under Karen's rule, a car slowly rolled by. I recognized it immediately. Karen. She had come back for one last look at what she lost. Her eyes darted to my truck, still parked exactly where she had tried to remove it. Then she saw my sign, the one that read, "Private property, not under HOA jurisdiction," and beneath it, "If you are here to issue a fake citation, attempt a fake arrest, or enforce fake laws, please take a moment to reflect on your life choices." Karen's face turned beet red. I raised my coffee cup in a mock toast. She sped off, and that was the last time I ever saw her. Some say she moved to another HOA. Others say she's still out there, issuing fake citations to squirrels. But me, I didn't care, because she was someone else's problem now.